Hello and welcome to the Along the Watchtower podcast. It is December 16th, 2020, Wednesday. Kind of said that in a weird order, sorry. uh, this is coming out to you late. There is a nor'easter that has hit the New York, Queens area. Shout out. And yeah, it took me an hour to get home. But in the time that I was waiting to go home, I was waiting for an Uber. I got into a elevated conversation of sorts, a heated. It was basically an argument in his defense, and to his admonishment. He was much calmer than I was, or at least he conveyed himself much calmer than I could. The conversation ended up getting racial. So with that, I'll get into that monologue in a second. We got a lot of beer bug pandemic stuff, and I mean none of it is like a critical update of a sort. It just new insights to give new perspective. But I gotta explain this because I mean it's taken me pretty much an hour to get to a point where I feel like I can convey myself effectively. So what ended up happening is I was discussing with my boss of all people, the his whole thing. He's an older gentleman, I think by 8 years. So he's in his 40s, and he was simply expressing his opinion about the high unemployment that was initially, I think it was 600 extra, and how it de-incentivized people to work. And I was saying, well, yes, be that as it may, though, you can't really, like, if you want on a gradual slope to decrease it as the economy begins to open, that's one thing. But, and we kind of broke down the math. We live in New York. We have the second highest tax rate in the country. And the fact is that rent is like 1,200. And so, the amount of money given rent, and that's the average rent, I don't even think it's just say the average rent is more like 18 to 23, but I don't even have my own pad, so this is estimated. But the point is that I felt like you couldn't just cut off that high, and it's not even really high, $600 on top of only 187.79, so you're getting like 787, but you are getting in every week, so there are things to weigh. However, the another gentleman interjected, and because what happens is that I was talking about the lack of what's happening now to push for a better stimulus bill, and I said there's blah 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 blah. There's no good politicians. They're all out to consolidate their own power. The gentleman interjected. I don't even know his name. But the guy, this coworker, younger guy, interjected and said, "Yeah, there's good politicians." And so I was like, "Oh, let's do this." So I went over and I asked him what he thought a good politician was, not necessarily in concept, but specifically. But in his defense, I didn't let him finish because I was like, my whole thing is I follow a policy, not a person or a politician. A policy, an idea, doesn't need a particular politician or person to carry it, right? Once it's in the ethos, anyone can grab hold and give it wind in its sail. He was like, well, no, a person needs the idea needs a person. And I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And the first example I brought up was Big Brother, right? When someone says Big Brother, what comes to mind? The idea of the Orwellian society, right? The technocracy. Big Brother is watching you. This idea of government surveillance, of government and technology, coming together in such a way that an oppressive government or oppressive governance then comes to power, was first propagated by George Orwell in 1948. He didn't know who George Orwell was, didn't know about 1984, written in 1948. And I was like, okay, cool. So let me because he's a black dude. I was like, let me reach out to an idea you probably do understand. I talked about Martin Luther King. I was like, so the idea of racial integration, right, didn't stop when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And that was the one thing we agreed on, because I first said killed, or when he died, and then he corrected me, was like, no, he was killed, and I was like, no, he was assassinated. But anyway, I digress. Because then I was like, the civil rights movement continued with this concept, this idea. They carried it forth. It's not that they didn't want him, but they didn't need him in necessarily to be the champion of it. It has a mind. And for some reason, he didn't understand that concept. In fact, he seemed to spin it in a straw man. And this is the thing. I recently posted a clip from Hotep Jesus, I think his name is. And I'm not familiar with the gentleman. I'm sure there are a lot of issues with him. I haven't really looked into him. But in this particular context, he expressed an idea. And this is why you follow an idea, not a person necessarily. He espoused an idea that I agreed with. So in that, we can agree. Right? That's technically how the whole political thing is supposed to work. You don't necessarily have to like the politician to stand with him in support of something, a policy, an idea that is beneficial to inevitably the people that matter, us, the denizens, the voters, the average person. That's what matters. That's why it's so dangerous to follow a political party, a particular politician, and not a policy. A lot of P's. It's going to be a huge explosive thing. Anyway. So, I mean, this went on for 45 minutes because he didn't know who George Orwell was. And here's the kicker. He didn't understand what I was talking about when I expressed the idea of racial integration, being an idea that didn't necessarily need Martin Luther King. And then he looked at another black coworker and was like, if I asked you as a black man, if you were living the American dream, would you say that you were? And it's like, where did that even come from? What does that even have anything? And this is what Hotep Jesus was talking about. This is the clip that I was watching. He was talking about something written in Saul Alinsky's book Rule for Radicals, where the too long didn't read it, right? The summation is that you don't have to attack or deal with or directly respond to an idea. In the court of public opinion and heated emotions and words, phrases, and ideas that inherently have a very disdainful pretext behind them. Race as an ugly pretext behind them. It's a very sensitive topic, right? But one that obviously needs to be fleshed out, needs to be discussed. The problem is that if you aren't willing to discuss something very sensitive, then you will only be reacting to this sensitive thing. There is no ability, no latitude for you to think, to react otherwise. You're not thinking at that point. You're simply reacting. You're triggered. Right. So me bringing up racial integration triggered him to then bring up racial disharmony. And that for him was simply that was what he was responding to, even though I had said nothing about that. I was talking about the power of an idea, the need for an idea to champion a person, because people are corruptible, people are fallible, and people die. Ideas live on forever, or at least they can. Like history, it can be skewed, corrupted, or lost to time. Didn't understand anything what I was saying. And in fact, when I tried to explain to him, I eventually disengaged. I realized that I was getting, heated, and and he was expressing he hadn't gotten necessarily racist or bigoted yet, but he was expressing very closeted, a very closeted attitude towards what I was saying. In fact, he wasn't really responding to what I was saying about an idea. He was responding to what I said about racial integration, and for some reason spun that into racial segregation. Now, although I haven't said the word segregation yet, neither in this rant nor in the conversation I was having with him, I'll explain why I've used it just now. When I disengaged, and then I was talking to someone else, and then later on he came around, and I was just trying to kind of start the conversation in less of an aggressive way. He said that I had presumed that he didn't know who George Orwell was and what 1984 was. And of course, that wasn't the case. I didn't presume anything he didn't know, and that was fine. That's why I tried to use another example. I was like, okay, well, who's George Orwell then? What is 1980? Just playing out, because I don't like to dance around this. I'm not going to be cater to your ego. If you know, then you know. And if you don't know, I can explain it to you. It's not a big deal. I like to talk and flesh these, come on now. Be an adult, right? So his response is amazing. His response, he said, I don't know what 1984 is. I've never read it. But I know that George Orwell, and this is paraphrasing, George Orwell represents what all white people represent. And that's when in my head, I was like, oh, I can't believe it. I've stepped in it. I've stumbled onto another victim of critical race theory. And I said, well, what do you mean? What is the idea that all white people express? And he said, well, all white people are oppressive racists. And he's in, I won't name the store, but he's in a multinational $1 billion store full of races of all kinds, including white people. Just everybody's chilling, just buying electronics because electronics don't care what race you are, man. Neither does money. But I digress. And that's when I was like, all right, so listen, respectfully, I'm not. And I was actually more respectful the second time I tried to disengage. The first time I just kind of laughed at him and went away. But the second time I was like, respectfully, I can see that on a fundamental level, we disagree. Our perceptions of people in reality fundamentally are separate. And the fact that they are so far separate doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that I feel like you're being racist. I feel like what you just said was very racist. And because of that, I just don't feel like I need to talk to you. We don't need to do it anymore. And he proceeded to he proceeded to try to drag another coworker in and like kind of have this side conversation near me where he's expressing to him his skewed view. Basically, like I said earlier, I talked about racial integration. He looked at another black dude, was like, yeah, do you feel like the American dream is what you're living right now? And just, oh, right, I forgot to explain to you white. Right, so he, after telling me that all white people are inherently oppressive racist, and I respectfully said, I feel like that was racist, da-da-da. He then was like, well, you brought up Martin Luther King and racial segregation. No, he brought up Martin Luther King and segregation. And I was like, wait. I didn't even say the word segregation to you, Hilmy. I said racial integration. I have a dream that the idea that propagated an entire civil rights movement, that right there is the example of what he didn't get it. And he then tried to drag another guy in and started talking. And it's just like, this is what Hotep Jesus was talking about, the attack of the person. Because immediately, if you look at something someone says and you call it racist, the idea is that, well, it's not even an idea. The objective is to excommunicate them from the conversation, right? To eliminate an ability to have a dialogue. Regardless of if what they're saying or doing actually is what you're saying, it is such a sensitive, heated subject. There's been a concerted effort to smother a dialogue about it. And that sort of overt, and again, he says all this in the middle of the store, we're having this discussion, and like everyone, it's just the inability for there to be an acknowledgement of reality. And that's what it comes down to. I and Hotep was talking about this. You cannot meet an attack, a ad hominem mindless attack on a concept, on a person, with logical dictation on a concept. If I say to you, an idea can live on beyond a person, and then your response is that's racist, how am I supposed to have a conversation with you? That's what that boiled down to. And I know that there's no like leap there missed. And it was like the first example I used of George Orwell, a white man who spoke overtly and outwardly about oppressive government regimes, which are, yes, usually run by crusty white people. But the point is that they oppress everyone, no matter what color they are, including white folks. It's ironic that he then said that George Orwell is an oppressive racist. Isn't George Orwell Jewish? Didn't he live through the Holocaust? I mean, I don't know. You know what? My rant, it's gone on long enough. Catharsis of some kind achieved. Probably not. But I do have the next few days off. So no, I have the next day. Anyway, we're not going to go there. So, we got some beer bug stuff, some pandemic stuff. We got some more hypocrisy from governor of Rhode Island. They're so blatant about it. That they will do it. They will say stay home, and within days, they won't even give like 7 days, like a good solid week. Get biblical. Get on the 7th day. They were hypocrites. Like, no, she did it like 3-4 days afterwards. She did no time. And the thing is, it's not like they have like a private party. They go out in public. The thing that they're telling everyone to not do, they go and do, and they do it in such a way that you wonder if if the snobbery class has a like the elite the elitism within the elite has arisen, right? You have entrenched Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, who I'll speak about in a minute, who has become yet again the subject of ridicule because the stimulus bill that started once at 1.2 trillion and Trump said he would go as high as 2 trillion or more, it went to 945 billion and is now at 900 billion. I mean, it's decreasing rapidly, and the thing is, we were supposed to have essentially as a starting floor what was given in March, right? $1,200 stimulus, $600 additional unemployment, and they were supposed to add on to that. There was supposed to be an increase. There wasn't even supposed to be this debate as to whether or not we'd get that. This most recent iteration was brought to the floor today at 4:30. This is how the conversation that, by the way, started. My boss was like, here, I just blah, blah, blah about the bill. And it was like 4:23 p.m. I remember exactly. Dude, that conversation was horrible. That guy was a racist. But anyway, and the new bill is $300 unemployment and I think a $1,200 check. But McConnell's not going to go for that. He's not. And this is the trash on both sides that we have to deal with. So, for example, as a sort of pivot to Medicare for All, Jimmy Dore, Justin, forgot his name. He's a Charger. He plays for the LA Chargers, NFL player, but he's also an activist. Smart guy. He was on the Jimmy Dore show. He and Jimmy called out AOC because no one will put pressure on AOC on Nancy Pelosi to put Medicare for All to a vote by withholding their vote, because there seems to be enough progressives now, well, at least everyone believes there seems to be enough progressives now to be enough of a nag for the Democrats due to their losing of House seats, which is a direct result of them not supporting progressive initiatives and then blaming progressives, right, for the losses in seats that they got, right? Because now their margin is so slim, pundits believe that there is enough of a progressive majority, actual progressives, not the progressive caucus, but actual progressives, the squad and some, what we'll call them, to hold up Nancy Pelosi's vote as House Speaker. Now, the whole thing is now being argued, because first in the Twitter battle, AOC was like, well, no, because if they call your bluff, essentially, what do you have? Because the leverage you could have used for things that you can actually get practically, you now have lost. And the whole thing about it is if you do it and she calls your bluff, which, nobody expects it to actually pass. But what ends up happening is you get names on the record of who does and does not support a basic health, a basic right, a basic human right that most first world, if not every first world country on the planet is able to tend to, and not America. Apparently it was something, what was it, 18 million people at one point? Anyway, millions of people lost their health care due to the coronavirus and the economy shutting down. And it's a nightmare. And so there's more, hypocrisy from Democratic governors. And that's another thing. I'm always trying to cater to everyone, to give everyone an opportunity to discuss and have dialogue, because it's important that you talk to the people you have to live with. At the end of the day, you have to live with these people. I was talking to someone else who was speaking about the Hotep Jesus clip and, talking about Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, and the attacking of a person and rather than a policy. And his whole thing, the whole thing I expressed is, without an ability to have dialogue, you really, for like sensitive critical issues like these, you really only leave three options: war, expatriation, or incarceration. You're not without dialogue. There's really, that's how animals are. We are animals, and as humans, dialogue, communication is one of our greatest tools. The ability to share ideas, to codify them, to cherry pick and amalgamate what's best among them. That's what makes us fucking amazing. Well, one of many things, but I digress. Let's begin here. This is a good one, some good news. For the first time in its history, UNICEF will feed children in the UK. UNICEF says it is the first time in its 70-year history that it has responded to a UK domestic emergency. Now that's interesting. Given there being, last time I checked, there was, a adolescent homeless crisis in the UK before this, but fine. For the first time, UNICEF has launched a domestic emergency response in the UK to help feed children hit by the COVID-19 crisis. The UN agency responsible for providing humanitarian and developmental aid to children worldwide has likened the effect of the coronavirus pandemic on youngsters to that of the Second World War. I thought about the Battle of the Blitz, but UNICEF didn't exist, when London was being bombed. Since the first national lockdown in March, the number of families struggling to make ends meet and across food and access food has grown, as the economy has suffered and vital jobs have been lost. In May, a YouGov poll commissioned by the charity Food Foundation found that 2 million children, or 17%, were living in food-insecure households. And by October, it is said an extra 900,000 children had been registered for free school meals. UNICEF has now pledged a grant of €25,000, which leaves one to think, does UNICEF not have a lot of funding, or are they just being stingy? To the charity School Food Matters, which will use the money to supply thousands, and it's like out of 2.4 million children, thousands. I mean, anything is better than nothing. But you always wonder with these massive organizations how little actually gets allocated to the work they're supposed to be doing, or at least that they say they exist for. But something's better than nothing. Food Matters, which will use the money to supply thousands of breakfast boxes over the 2-week Christmas school holidays to vulnerable children and families in Southwark, South London. Each box will provide enough food for 10 breakfasts across the Christmas holiday. Anna Ketterly of UNICEF UK says, "We feel it's critical to come together at this time." Yeah, so, it's in a lot of what's happening, it's definitely a silver lining of some kind. I'll take what I can get. This is really an interesting. This is the thing, right? I feel like a lot of the time when someone says that it's an amazing time to be alive, it's the most interesting time to be alive, it's usually during a very tumultuous time in human history. For some of you, like myself, you're thinking, well, when has there not been a tumultuous time in human history? I'd like to say the 80s, but the war on drugs was raging. And like the crack epidemic was it's like there are always things happening somewhere, right? In particular in America, for the context of this conversation, we've been pretty much from back-to-back wars, global wars, and to international proxy conflicts, right? To what they call policing actions in the Middle East while the war on drugs. So it's like there's always a conflict that is afflicting the populace of America in one way or another, and then like globally, there's always something. And so in this interesting time to be alive, right? Because there was a pandemic back in the 1917 Spanish flu. That was also an interesting time. I love history. It was also an interesting time to be alive. Millions of people died, and it was horrible, but it's still interesting, right? So in this interesting time to be alive, this time of great change and upheaval that's occurring, I see the precipice from which humanity is looking. And in all the excitement and energy you hear me talk with, I obviously imagine us with wings, or better yet, I imagine us unlocking our noetic potential and not even needing wings and flying and ascending to, the ethereal above. What we seem to be doing is, yes, my Wi-Fi is horrible. What we seem to be doing is kind of leaning over the precipice and looking down at the jagged cliffs below rather than up above at potentially what we could become. And it's like I advocate looking towards history with an eye of understanding and patience rather than animosity to the point of cognitive dissonance. It is just this radicalization that's occurred, and it is scary. You cannot have a conversation. It's like once you stop talking, that's when and neither way, yes, because after I disengaged, he was brought up by the other gentleman was skewing what I was saying to him, not even getting anything I was saying to him right. And I was like, this is probably really exciting for you, right? And that's when he threatened me. He was like, yeah, it'd be exciting for me is to pound your face into the ground. And I was just like, yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, maybe later. But it's just like, that's what animals do. That's what motherfuckers in jail do. And it's like, be you, do what you have to do. If that's how you feel, that's how you express yourself, that's fine. You know what I mean? I just laughed at him. But like, that's what we've degenerated into. Radicalization. It's all downhill from here. So there was a recent, someone tweeted out, I forgot who it was. It might have been Mike Cerno on his Twitter, but they have now grouped all COVID-related deaths, pneumonia-related deaths, and influenza deaths together. It's called the percentage statistics called a PIC stat. So nationally, surveillance indicators tracking levels of SARS-CoV-2 circulation and associated illnesses have been increasing since September. However, the percentage of emergency department visits for COVID-like illnesses decreased slightly during week 49. The percentage of deaths due to pneumonia, influenza, and COVID, PIC, has been increasing since September. When did they change this diagnostic? When did they change this statistic? I mean, everything keeps cutting out. I was because I remember, and yes, that's going to be interesting. I remember when the COVID data stopped going directly to the CDC and started going through the White House, right? And that's when they ended up, allegedly, or people were worried about them changing how the statistics were being codified. But then we find that the CDC's done it anyway. I just wanted to point that out. I'm just finding it interesting. And obviously, you want there to be progression in the understanding of a crisis or emergency, especially one that's really scientifically based and not like politically based, vis-a-vis an international crisis, in the Middle East or something like that. But progression is just interesting. How they're deciding to, correlate deaths and the statistics are interesting. We will see more to come. But I found this cool as well, right? This is just like a compare and contrast of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. I'll just go through this briefly. Health experts on the verge of possibly having two COVID-19 vaccines, and ABC 13 has learned how the two compare. According to the FDC, the Moderna vaccine was 94.1% effective at preventing symptomatic cases. The Pfizer vaccine claimed 95% effectiveness. I don't know when that happened. They hadn't done that until just before they had gotten approval. So let me put that there. Both vaccines required two doses. However, for those receiving the Pfizer vaccine, the second dose is administered 21 days after the first. Moderna's second dose is administered 28 days after the first. They both also developed the messenger RNA, a new type of vaccine that creates a blueprint for those essential antibodies without actually infecting people with COVID-19. Which is interesting because with like the flu vaccine, I thought they had to use live virus and live and retroviruses. But anyway, again, I just read this stuff. I just read this stuff and chew on it. They differ once again in how they are stored. Pfizer needs to be stored at 94 degrees below zero. After it thaws, it can be stored in a normal fridge for 5 days. Moderna's vaccine still needs to be kept cold, but rather at a standard freezer temperature, -4 degrees. After it thaws, it can be refrigerated for 30 days. So Pfizer's vaccine is more sensitive and it decomposes highly quickly, very quickly. Pfizer's vaccine was authorized for people 16 ages and up. Moderna is still seeking authorization for people 18 and older. I thought Pfizer's study didn't include it. I literally just read that the other day. What is this? The side effects seem to be the biggest thing on people's minds. So far, minor temporary side effects like tiredness and headache have been reported by the CDC. Here's a full list of possible side effects that both vaccines can have on people. Pain at the injection site, headache, fever, fatigue, chills, muscle and joint pain, which is the usual. The difference is that the Moderna's vaccine side effects were found to be more common after the second dose. Either way, health experts say people may want to consider taking the day off of work after getting the second shot. There are still some areas we need to learn about, for example, how the vaccine works in children and in pregnant women. Many are also wondering if you can choose which vaccine to get. ABC 13 spoke with a Bayer College of Medicine and Infectious Disease professor. Dr. Jill Weatherhead said it is very unlikely people will get to choose which vaccine they get because it'll depend on which is available in their area. Oh boy. Vaccines must not be mixed and matched. Oh no. On Tuesday, the first Houston nurses and doctors received a card showing which vaccine they took. Others are likely to get something similar, so it can be presented when receiving the second dose. So, right, we just read that. There's a couple of funny things. Speaking of side effects, Alaskan healthcare worker experiences serious but rare reaction to Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. So again, Pfizer's vaccine is the one that needs to be stored at 94 degrees below zero and can only last 5 days after being thawed out, unlike Moderna, which only needs -4 and can be stored for 30 days after being thawed out. So Pfizer's vaccine is showing to be like, I don't want to say more volatile, but it's unstable or something, right? I guess that's the best way I can put that. Again, I don't know if I'm misremembering. I know I smoke pot. I got issues, fine. But I'm pretty sure I read right here that Pfizer's vaccine did not incorporate ages 16 to 17, right? Or it was either 15 to 17 or 16 and 17-year-olds. And it incorporated the elderly later on in the study. But I could be misremembering. But, a healthcare worker in Alaska experienced what appears to be a rare but serious allergic reaction to Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, according to the New York Times. The worker, who had no history of allergies, that's the thing that worries me, because I have no history of allergies. And I mean, I don't mean to personalize it, but that's the thing that I'm taking into consideration, is that it's one thing if you have a history of anaphylactic shock or allergens to something, but if you have no history of allergies and something can happen, that pretty much makes, everyone's vulnerable. The worker, who had no history of allergies, was under observation in a hospital on Wednesday morning, according to the Times, and is set to be discharged later in the day. The worker experienced flushing and shortness of breath, which subsided after being treated with epinephrine. She is healthy and she's doing well, Dr. Lindy Jones, Emergency Department Medical Director at Bartlett Regional Hospital in Junio, told the paper. 2 health workers in Britain experienced similar allergic reactions after receiving the vaccine last week, but both have recovered. The United Kingdom issued a warning that anyone with a history of allergic reactions to medicine or food should not get the shot. We read that. One of the British health workers had a history of egg allergies, while the other was allergic to several different medications. Right. It's glad that they're bringing everything up under one umbrella, but again, the difference here is that they have a history of allergies. If people who don't have a history of allergies can have an allergic reaction, I feel like that should at least raise considerable alarms as to, I don't know, maybe that 5%, because right, it's 95% effective. Maybe it's that 5%. I don't know. I'd love to have an inside track into Pfizer's data. Perhaps there is something. I'm going on. Still, Pfizer's trial of more than 40,000 people, right? Didn't find any serious health issues, right? Though many did report side effects, including aches and fevers. That tends to happen with vaccinations anyway. Serious health issues from Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine appear to be rare, and the shot was deemed safe and effective by the FDA. You've heard me go on about that. A Pfizer spokesperson said they don't have all the details of the report yet, but are working with local health authorities to assess the situation. Well, that's good. That brings me to this. This is I'll be honest with you. This is stuff I love to chew on. So apparently, and this is covered by local news. Sinclair, the Sinclair video showed us how news is trickled down from on high, and the narrative is contrived, and consent is manufactured. Narrative is constructed, and the whole thing is a gimmick designed to get you interested. The Sinclair video had the numerous reporters basically that literally reading verbatim off of a script, and they're from all around the country, so you should look that up. It's a trippy video. What ended up happening is this local news station, KTSM, got bombarded with viewers calling in, and I guess emailing in, and asking questions about a video that was put on the air by the station, in which a supposed vaccination was occurring, but the plunger was already depressed. The syringe was already depressed, meaning that it was already used, meaning that, according to this, they faked this video of injecting this person with the vaccine. So let me just read this. Again, I'm just reading this, right? Questions raised over vaccine injection at UMC event. UMC says nurse received second shot to eliminate doubt over vaccination. Some of our viewers raised questions about video KTSM 9 News showed from Tuesday's COVID-19 vaccine injections at UMC of El Paso. specifically the second vaccine that was administered. In our video, you can see the UMC healthcare worker with his sleeve rolled up, but when it comes time for the injection, it appears that the person administering the shot doesn't push down on the plunger. The plunger looks to have already been depressed. Some eagle-eyed KTSM 9 News viewers wondered if the worker received the vaccine at all. KTSM reached out to UMC on Tuesday. A UMC spokesperson maintained that all 5 healthcare workers were given the full doses of the vaccine, and the hospital agreed to take a closer look at our video. The UMC said its nurse received a second COVID-19 shot to eliminate doubt that he was vaccinated. Wait. Instead of telling... let me just finish reading. The hospital responded that the nurse whose shot was questioned has received a second dose to eliminate any doubts. Okay. After numerous reports emerged on social media claiming one of the 5 nurses receiving a vaccination on Tuesday did not receive a full dose, we want to remove any doubt raised that he was not fully vaccinated and further strengthen confidence in the vaccination process. All right, hold on. UMC said to KTSM, the nurse in question today was vaccinated again. Okay, good. He got both his shots. All right, that's cool. He's not going to get COVID. UMC is confirmed with the U.S. Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices that revaccinating the nurse will not cause adverse effects. The nurse will need to return after 3 weeks to receive his second dose. Okay, so if we take the fact that they stumbled onto the regimen of 2 doses from the information we know is that they stumbled onto it, they accidentally were giving too much in the first session of dosing. They were giving 2 shots in one sitting, and they found out they needed to spread it out. And you couple that with the fact that apparently, let's start it, because it's like, wait a minute, you didn't respond to anything. You gave the guy a second shot, even though we know that you're not supposed to get more than 2 shots spread out, right? So if you're not supposed to get more than 2 shots spread out, or else it makes you really sick, and they gave this guy another shot, then it's, for me at least, I think good enough to say that he didn't get his second shot in the video that they showed. But furthermore, right, they didn't actually address the fact of the video. They didn't say, well, hey, in the video you guys are mistaken. He actually did get his second shot. No, what they said was to make sure that everyone is their fears are quelled about whether or not he got his full vaccination. He got another shot. Just so you know, he got his full vaccination, so he's good on the COVID thing, all right? Take care. That's not what we asked, bro. I wanted to know if the vaccination that was seen in this video, and I know it's not loading now, but you can just go and look it up. KTSM, you see the URL, do digging, do your own work, right? I want to know because I saw the video. Anyway, I digress. I want to know if the video that we all saw, did he get the vaccination or not? It's a very simple thing. Even if you placate me, right, and just tell me he got the shot, I'll have to accept that. I'll have to accept you at your word. Instead, they just said, just so you know, we gave him another. I don't want to say another because that would suggest he got the second dose. We gave him a shot to make sure that he had the full regimen of vaccination, just to make sure you're cool with that. That's not what we asked. So I found that very fascinating. I always find things like that fascinating, where there's a narrative constructed that flies in the face of reality, and we're just supposed to eat it up. And at least in this case, they didn't try to fib. Because, I mean, if you have video of it and it's clearly depressed and it's like it's a very simple causality here. I'm watching you not depress the syringe to give the vaccination. I know how a friggin' needle works, right? I don't have a degree in virology or epidemiology, but I know how the syringe works. And if you don't depress the needle, you're not getting anything from it. So it's like, come on, stop with the theater. But they didn't do that. They just pivoted away from it. It's fun. There are other instances, there's been recently released emails of the White House pressuring the CDC to change statistics. A Florida health official was fired, had their home raided because they created an alternative system because Florida's numbers had been told, everybody was talking about Florida as an example of how not opening or doing alternative opening methods or closing methods, lockdown methods, was effective because Florida's numbers were low. Well, apparently Florida was lying. And this healthcare official whose name escapes me, but she developed an alternative system to deliver authentic statistics to people like myself, nosy little people like me who just want reality and the truth. God forbid we have the truth. Yeah, she had her home raided, was fired from a job, whole thing. So there's been just rampant lies and deception everywhere. And I've today I hit my point. It's like, you know what? I am not the type to fight reality. I did not get myself out of the situation that I was in by facing the reality of the situation that I was in just to come to this world where no one wants to deal with shit like a thoughtful, engaging person. I'm not with that. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to cater to your ego anymore. I can't do it. I won't do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So here's some real, here's a real gem. We want them infected. Trump appointee demanded herd immunity strategy, emails reveal. So, I was telling you about the emails. There's been tons of stuff coming out. He's on the way out. So, you're just going to keep seeing shit like this. So, emails about the White House pressuring the CDC to change stats, leaning on him, such and such. They ended up kind of caving. But then we have stuff like this. The then Health and Human Services science advisor, Paul Alexander, called for millions of Americans to be infected as a means of fighting COVID-19. Now, remember when this was expressed as in jest, as like a parody in a satirical manner, right? No, this was actual thing. This is an actual thing. Now, I understand that herd immunity does require everyone to get it. I understand how that functions, but you don't want people purposefully infect. Like that's not smart. That's because you do, especially, and here's the thing for me. Depending on what time frame you look at, depending on when this was suggested, it could have been early on when we knew very little, or before it mutated to have massive upper respiratory infections, right? And it's this is just, ugh. Oh, the madness. The madness will give me an aneurysm. That's what's going to kill me. A top Trump appointee repeatedly urged top health officials to adopt a herd immunity approach to COVID-19 and allow millions of Americans to be infected by the virus, according to internal emails obtained by a House watchdog and shared with Politico. There is no other way. We need to establish herd, and it only comes about allowing the non-high risk groups expose themselves to the virus, period. How do you, this is like with the minks. How do you do that effectively when oh, and I know you have to know because you have a job in the White House. So I know you know things. Oh my God. Then science advisor Paul Alexander wrote on July 4th. Ooh, yeah, that was during the summer. Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary, that was like when it was reaching an apex. Infants, kids, teens, young people, young adults, middle-aged with no conditions have zero to little risk. So we use them to develop herd. We want them infected. It may be that it will be best if we open up and flood the zone and let the kids and young folks get infected in order to get natural immunity, natural exposure, Alexander wrote on July 24th. So that he campaigned for this over a period of time. To the FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn, Caputo, and 8 other senior officials. Caputo subsequently asked Alexander to research the idea, according to emails obtained by the House Oversight Committee's Select Subcommittee on Coronavirus. Alexander also argued that colleges should stay open to allow COVID-19 infections to spread, lamenting in a July 27 email to the CDC Director Robert Redfield that we essentially took off the battlefield the most potent weapon we had. Younger, healthy people, children, teens, young people who we needed to fastly infect themselves, spread it around, develop immunity, and help stop the spread. Again, from a scientific perspective, I understand what he means. The problem is that with no sort of preventative measures at all, you can't really control how something like that occurs. You can't control who and how it's infected. It's who and how it's infecting. Excuse me. You can't practically implement something like that unless you round up they'll round up people and just purposefully infect them. I don't know. Again, I'm not a virologist. I can't, and you know what? I feel like I'm not qualified necessarily to suggest an alternative domestic plan for purposefully infecting people. But I don't feel like that there is an effective plan to do that. So from that, we're getting down to the hypocrisy, the madness. As you know, BLM has another autonomous zone in Seattle right now. I'm not sure if they've come to some agreement and they're removing barricades and letting. I'm not sure. But last I checked, there hadn't been any deaths. I could be wrong about that. Probably should have double checked before. It's been a long day. But there's been a proposed poverty excuse for crimes. So what's happened is that apparently there's been put forth legislation to allow, or rather remove, the illegality of, they said, over 100 misdemeanors, including shoplifting, trespassing, theft, and things like that. I think all of them are nonviolent, but to remove the illegality of over 100 misdemeanors, as long as the assailant, right, can claim they were motivated out of poverty. That is to say that if you are poor and homeless, you can use that as justification for over 100 former misdemeanors. As a person who used to be homeless and used to sleep out, I can understand from the perspective of like trespassing, like sleeping overnight. That's already a thing. That's trespassing, right? You're in an area you're not supposed to be, or you're doing something in an area you're not supposed to be doing it in, like sleeping on a beach. You can't sleep on the beach in California. You get an illegal lodging ticket. It's a form of trespassing. But you can't. What ends up happening is that the judge looks at the illegal lodging ticket and the context of it and just excuses it because you're homeless, you're poor, you ain't paying nothing anyway. That's like pretty much it for me. Like theft, harassment. So I can justify harassing you by saying I'm poor. My poverty is the motivating factor for me harassing you for money, right? I'm spanging. Give me $1. Give me $1. You ain't gonna give me $1. Reach my hand in your window. Message you. Like cats out here crazy. Homeless dude came. I'm not even gonna go into that story. I was waiting for the bus to end. But anyway, the point I'm trying to get to is that there are definitely points in our life in which desperation becomes the motivator, and we do things that we're not proud of. But there are limitations to that as a justification. Committing a crime still, because the idea of the punishment, hopefully given the crime is not severe, is to wake you up. Like after a while, I eventually woke up. And I mean, not everybody's the same. I understand that. But you can't excuse these things. You can't. So let me read this a little bit. Matthew Humphrey recently lost $4,000 worth of goods in a theft of his Seattle barbershop. Under a new proposal, the Seattle City Council is considering this month what happened to him wouldn't even be a crime if the thieves claimed they were driven by poverty. I think it's insane, the victimized barber told a local news outlet. It's one of these well-intentioned concepts of we want to take care of people that can't take care of themselves, but what you really are doing is hurting other people. Up for debate is a reform proposed by Seattle City Council member Lisa Herbold for up to 100 different misdemeanor crimes, including theft, harassment, shoplifting, trespassing, and more. An individual can be excused if he or she claims poverty was their motive. In a situation where you took that sandwich because you were hungry and you were trying to meet your basic need of satisfying your hunger, we as a community will know that it should not be punished. Right. Because you can't draw a blanket over things like that. Poverty, mental illness, homelessness, those things are nuanced. Everybody's in those situations for different reasons. Now, of course, there's going to be people who have similar stories, who have very similar stories. You know, vets who have mental illness, PTSD, can't even be in a home, can't even be in four walls, right? Got to be outside. I knew a couple of them back in California. There are people who just want to be homeless. They're retired, and they're again, most of this is in California, because in the California situation, you can be outside and sleep outside most of the year round, which eliminates the need for you to pay rent and things like that. And that's the route a lot of these guys take. But I digress because they're getting money. You have people then who have mental illness who are non-functional. Schizophrenics who, took too much acid and are broken mentally and can't function in society, run around screaming at walls in their underwear and stuff. And it's like there's a balance that needs to be met here. If someone with mental illness severely harasses someone, the question then needs to ask, well, was it physical? Was it verbal? What kind of mental illness? Like, how long have they been dealing with this? Because obviously they need help. They don't need the crime excused. All that does is just send them back out into the street. You got to be nuanced. You can't throw a blanket like this over, and especially with the justification of poverty. Anyone can just claim they're impoverished. Like, bro, if you refuse to get a job and you've been living with your mom and you're 40 years old and you get caught stealing something, like that should not be excused. That's madness. I digress. We got the hypocrite. Rhode Island governor tells citizens to stay home before heading to wine bar. I mean, this is a quick read. I don't save trouble. Basically, she told everyone to stay home and to not conduct any sort of unessential activity. And then several days later, went out to a wine bar, took pictures with people, hung out without her mask. Although, according to the wine patron that was serving her, she only took her mask off when she was drinking her wine. All right. I'm not even going to waste my time with that. I already actually covered that. But just to conclude with more entrenched Democrat nonsense, right? AOC, Nancy Pelosi needs to go, but there's nobody to replace her yet. Here's the problem. If you wait for someone who you consider better, you will never, ever change. You'll be waiting forever, essentially. It's just one thing where we need to choose the lesser of two evils every 4 years. You end up having still an evil person. I will always, always, always commit to the fact that if Bernie had remained an independent, we would not be talking about third parties the way that we are today. And what's interesting is that one, could strategize that he moved to the Democratic Party in order to be recognized and in order to have access to that money. But he didn't get access to that money and ended up raising more than any Democratic candidate who had access to that money through grassroots and independent donations. And number two, he's been shut out of his own party and cannibalized in not one, but two different elections. Bruh, you went to the Democrats for nothing. And now you have to cater and cotter to them. Good for you. Good for you. Nice. Nice. So now what we have is a situation where we have progressives who are kind of doing nothing, even though the progressives who have recently won during this most recent election won on progressive initiatives. And the first thing they should do is withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi. It's not hard, because if you get a vote for Medicare for all, you get to find out who's for it and who's against it, regardless of if it passes or not. And we all know it's not going to pass. That's not the point. The point is to put their feet to the fire and let it be known to their constituents, hey, did you know that the person who represents you does not think that you should have free medical health care? In fact, they don't believe healthcare is a human right. How about that? I bet if you put their feet to the fire, you will see a lot of these guys and gals change tunes real quick. So with this idea that you propose, AOC, that you say that the Democratic Party needs change, and it seems that you are unwilling to take the action to play the political game required to enact that change. What's interesting is that you have been elected on the Medicare for All and progressive platform, on calling for Nancy Pelosi to be held accountable, and now that it's time, you won't do it. And that's because, like most of these people, you are becoming very quickly. You got the game very good, an entrenched career politician. Good for you. Good for you. Good. So now we're in a locked situation where we're going to get a $900 billion stimulus. We hope this one's going to pass, and we hope at the numbers that it's at right now. But the numbers are so low that, it's 12. They're looking at a $1,200 stimulus, I believe, and a $600 unemployment, but it's only for like 6 weeks. Nancy recently went on and was talking about how, now that we have a vaccine, that we don't need an extended, stimulus support, financial support. The problem is that we don't know when the economy is going to open up again. We have governors all around talking about lockdowns or locking down. De Blasio just the other day said that if we don't get our percentages down within like the next week, we're gonna lock down again. So how long now that we have a vaccine do we have to wait before everything opens up for us to find out 40% of the jobs that we had are gone, right? And then you tell me that we won't need financial support then. Will we then have to wait 6 more months for you to debate and politic? This is madness. This makes sense in their head, because they're playing politics, right? This doesn't make sense in the scheme of reality and what is necessary and what is needed, right? And it's like people who are suffering because of their politicking are still supporting this I don't know what it is. It's not reality. They're this alternative perception of things. And it's like, you do know that you're being affected by this. You're going hungry, you're going broke, and yet here you are still touting, the Democratic leadership and the Democratic Party really overall as supportive. And I'm not saying Republicans are any better. It's Mitch McConnell in the Senate that's knocking everything down. These people playing politics should have just listened to Orange Man when Orange Man was like 1.2. No, I'll go 2 trillion or more. And he was desperate to win, because then they had him by the balls. But no, because if they had signed it and given us money, right, That would have given Trump a win, and that may have been what he needed to tip the election. They can't do that. They got to play politics at all times, even when our lives are at stake. I'm done. Like, share, and subscribe, and be well to each other, please.